Welcome. It is my distinct pleasure to kick off the second annual Careers in Entrepreneurship in the Sciences Summit at Ohio University. As part of Global Entrepreneurship Week 2020, being celebrated all over the world this week. My name is Bob Colvin, Chair of Biological Sciences at Ohio University. Along with the Associate Director of the Center for Entrepreneurship, Paul Mass, the Director of Industry Partnerships in the Corporate Engagement Office, Kevin King, and the Executive Director for Tech Growth Ohio and Center for Entrepreneurship, Lynn Gellerman, we would like to welcome students, educators, scientists, and industry executives and entrepreneurs to the first of two exciting panel discussions highlighting how entrepreneurs and industry leaders have responded to the unprecedented challenges and opportunities of the COVID-19 global pandemic. Today's panel will discuss pandemic preparedness and response. We must face the reality that in today's interconnected world, pandemics are likely to recur again and again. This panel will shine a light on the inner workings of key government pandemic response functions and provide insights into how COVID-19 is driving permanent business process changes within companies that are rapidly bringing tools to market to fight the pandemic. This panel will be moderated by John Lewis, CEO of BioOhio, Ohio's only statewide membership organization supporting the bioscience community, representing over 300 members that employ over 100,000 Ohioans. We have three expert panelists joining us today. OU alumnus Karen Gibson, Senior Vice President of Digital Health for Quidel, a $1 billion point-of-care diagnostics company. Bob Huebner, currently Principal Consultant of Latham Biopharm Group. Bob is an experienced biotechnology program manager with over 30 years of research experience with viral and microbiological pathogens and expertise in the vaccine industry. And Calvin James, Associate Professor of Biomedical Sciences and Virology in the Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine at OU, as well as the Interim Director of the Diabetes Institute. Before we begin, I'd like to note that we will hold a Q&A at the end of today's session and encourage you to send in your questions via the Q&A box. It is my pleasure to now hand off the virtual microphone to John Lewis.
All right. Well, thanks for that intro. I was like jamming there. I hope some of you were too. We have a action-packed 50 minutes now, 52 minutes. It's really cool. I'm really glad to be here to help kind of lead some of this discussion. Hopefully it will be interactive, like kind of Bob said, ping into this Q&A at the bottom. We have 30 plus participants at the moment, but, ping questions to us. We want it to be interactive. We want it to be fun. It's the end of the day. So we want you to step it up and be funny if you can. I will try to be. One of the things I don't do is make introductions. So it's kind of nice that Bob read some of that. And in the invite stuff, the whole background of all of these speakers are there. I just have to say on a personal note, I've been with BioOhio for 20 years now, a little bit over 20 years, and really proud that Ohio University was one of our founding members 33 years ago. And there's only two universities, there's only two of our 8 founding members that have been on our board for all 33 years, and OU is one of them. Stacy Strauss at the Innovation Center is just a hyperly engaged, amazing board member representing you all at Ohio University. So we're happy to have that. We saw Karen. I was just killing a little bit of time. We had some people that were really they just had lots going on today, so the timing was tight. Karen, I see that you're on. But for each of our three speakers, I told you there'd be a surprise. So as you kind of kick off yourself and a little bit of your talk before we get to some of the Q&A, share with us a personal thing about COVID-19, preferably not professional, because that's what we're going to be talking about, but something that's kind of interesting that you did, over these past 9 months that are different with you, your family. Like for me, I'll start it off. I've lost 20 pounds. I did not get that COVID, whatever they say, COVID-19, extra. Eating better, exercising consistently. My wife and I, she has a big business, we spend an hour together during the day. There's been some kind of cool relationship things that have happened in my life. So each of you, that's the surprise for now. I won't call you out on something else, but you got to share something. And there always is something positive that's happened during this time. So Karen, Quidel, an amazing company, and we'll get to more to you, but why don't you you're up first. Tag, you're it.
Hey, Tag, I'm it. Well, thanks, John, and good afternoon, everybody from sunny San Diego, California. One of the personal things that I did is I actually bought a house and moved during the pandemic, which I would not recommend to anybody. It was a little stressful, but we had been looking for a while, and the perfect house came along. Actually, the perfect house was already sold, but because of the pandemic, the buyers backed out. So we were able to get it. And as we were looking at selling our old house, we decided that it's best to just move into the new one and then stage the old one and sell it, rather than have everybody walking through, because you never know if they were being careful or not. So yeah, I have a great story about, movers and masks and just working through all of that, but overcame, and we've been in our new house now for a couple of months.
Thanks for sharing. That's good. So the rest of you, you got the lead off with Karen there. Thanks, Karen. So again, this is kind of free flowing, so you can, share a little bit about what you're doing or what Quidel is doing.
Sure.
It's kind of exciting, and this will just be, you'll get a little snapshot here, then the other speakers will do it, and then we'll just go back and forth. Just like we kind of.
So if you don't know Quidel does point of care diagnostic testing. And in fact, one of our biggest divisions is, it was incubated out of the College of Ohio University, and was the first business out of the Innovation Center, and is located in Athens, Ohio. And so I've been with Quidel about 5 years now, actually a little over 5 years. And, it's been a crazy year, obviously, in diagnostic testing for us. We've introduced a bunch of new products, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's definitely been an interesting aspect to see how the healthcare ecosystem across the US has changed. And so I've just recently taken a new role for digital health. So we are looking at how we can take diagnostic testing into new markets and new areas like the home, mobile testing. And with my background in technology, there's a lot of capabilities that we're using with AI and mobile technology to help advance that. So, that's my new challenge. So it's really been fun to kind of watch our overall business grow and change. And now it allows us to take on some even more exciting opportunities.
Thanks, Karen. And you've been front and center. You're very humble so far. You guys have been amazing at what you're doing to help the whole country and around the world. So thanks for that kickoff. Bob, so let's go from Athens to Boston. You know, we got to have some of that action there. Thanks for participating. And again, we got to share something a little personal that's happened over the last 9 months.
Well, first thing, apologies, but a correction. I am not in Boston. I am located outside of Kansas City. So, probably my personal thing was I had a brother get married this summer, and my wife and I decided to attend the wedding, which was in Pennsylvania. So as opposed to flying cross country, we drove cross country, and it was like, well, how do you plan to do that safely and everything? And we also watched the description of my brother's wedding go from, a 200-person indoor event to a 20-person event outdoor in a tent. So, I think that's something about this year in particular, that we've all had to adapt some way and, make compromises, but also do some things differently. One of the questions I always like to ask people is, okay, you've been doing things differently for a while. What's going to stay? When COVID's done, how is it going to change? My background relevant to here is I used to work at BARDA, the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. And I was in the Influenza and Emerging Diseases Division, and I was the deputy director of that division for about 2.5 years and acting director for another 2.5 years. So we let contracts to companies like Quidel to develop diagnostics for pandemic influenza and other respiratory diseases. But if you ask people what kept them awake at night, it was always, you could point to flu and this and that, but it was always disease X. Well, I feel like this is a disease X year, that we are, we're in the middle of responding to disease X. And we've, hopefully lessons we've learned from this will make us respond better in the future. Today, I work as a consultant, and for a large part today, what I do is I really help, in addition to my normal work, added on top of that is helping people respond to opportunities for getting funding for COVID-19. There's billions of dollars are being spent for vaccines, for therapeutics, for diagnostics, and other medical countermeasures. And people are developing new technologies. And part of what I do is help people leverage those new technologies that they're developing and see how they can be applied to our response to COVID-19 as a nation and hopefully as a globe.
Pretty sweet. That's making an impact. That should hopefully allow you to sleep well at night, that you're helping, but hopefully it doesn't keep you up because there's so much more to do. Thanks, Bob.
Sure.
Calvin, you're kind of you're up. We're gonna go back. Sorry, we kind of went to Boston, but really didn't, and then we went to Kansas City, and then we'll come back to Athens with you. And I don't know. Let's hear something cool and interesting.
Well, the cool and interesting thing for me is that I think I have taken, and my family has taken lemons, the COVID crisis, and we've made lemonade. So we are first-time grandparents, and our daughter and granddaughter lives in Boston. In Chicago. You got Boston on my mind here. Live in Chicago. Well, the University of Chicago Daycare Center, where my granddaughter attended, had to shut down because of COVID. So they arrived in Athens with my 6-month-old granddaughter. And they're still here working from home. So I have watched a 6-month-old kid grow to a 14-month-old. sitting up, talking, walking, taking our daily walks. So you talk about not gaining weight. I've actually been more active with my several times a day walk with my granddaughter. And as I said, she is now walking, talking, and has become the boss of me. So that has been a fun thing for me to watch her grow. And I'm now at the point of dreading when COVID is over and she has to leave for Chicago. So I'm preparing myself for, when that happens, even though while she was in Chicago, we did several trips a month just to go visit her. So that's my kind of COVID story, outside of working from home. I guess on the professional front, I would say that I've been a professional educator. I have been a university professor here at Athens, Ohio for 31 years. So I've been in academia, I say, all of my professional life, from my PhD to my postdoc in New York for 4 years, and then moving to Athens, Ohio. My background is really, kind of broadly trained microbiologist, but my research area and my passion has been viruses. And, whenever I have an opportunity, and it's been a wonderful thing to have opportunity to, I always believe in taking the opportunity to, when it arises, to teach. I enjoy that. And so having friends and family and folks calling and getting a chance to say to people, viruses are not alive, which is something I always say. They're not alive. You can inactivate them, but they're not living entities. And so talking about viruses and giving people some, sense of what these things are and why they're as either we can use them for, to better our lives, or they can really make our lives miserable. And COVID-19 is a classic case of one of the things that I always say that William Ramosa said to me when I arrived in Athens and asked me to join the Tropical Disease Institute is, you always reminded me that the next pandemic is a plane flight away. And I've always tried to share with students and everyone that I have the opportunity to have a conversation with, the idea that we can, basic science is important in the preparation for the next pandemic. Basic science is important for, we're not good in imagining how we take science and take information and convert it into products. But that is important, that for those who have a passion for, entrepreneurship and looking at how it's possible to take knowledge and convert it into products. Research is important. Advancing knowledge is important. So I think from our standpoint, one of the things that COVID-19, I think, would have taught us is that if you look back at a lot of the technology and the information that existed out there and how it's now being applied in a rapid fashion to address the pandemic. So I hope I get a chance to talk a little bit more about those kinds of thoughts around research and basic science, and how we can marry our passion for research, science, and knowledge with someone else's passion for taking that information and turn it into products, etc., that would benefit mankind.
Well, Calvin, you're on a roll. Why don't you just elaborate? Right? There's no reason about, elaborate on those last couple of comments about, how basic research and science and stuff can help with the pandemic preparation, and just elaborate a little bit.
Well, I think a couple of things I'll point out. The using COVID as the jumping off point. When you read the story of RNA vaccines, for example, I have lived through the biotechnology revolution. I date myself because going back to when I started as a researcher, all of this technology, didn't exist. We sequenced genomes by hand. Today, you can get a sequence, within within hours, depending upon how large the genome is. So I've watched the biotechnology revolution and watched how basic science knowledge has kind of led us to the point where, for example, with COVID-19, we had the sequence of that virus within, I would say, less than a month. I don't remember the time frame, but it was rapid. And if we knew about messenger RNA for a long time, we talked about its biology, we understood a lot of how the cell worked, etc. We understood how viruses, for example, and in particular in this case, the biology of RNA viruses, and the replication cycle requiring special enzymes that do not exist within eukaryotic cells. We always talked about, oh, those are great targets, for example, for small molecules, because you will have selective toxicity, because these molecules can poison the RNA-dependent RNA enzyme, which really doesn't exist in cells, and would actually take care of the viral replication. Now, to see how all of this has actually transformed industry into rapidly gearing up to solving the problems. We now have a vaccine within what, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, and new technology at that. So my thing is to always say to those who fund basic science research, not to poo-poo the stuff that people are doing, and to take away funds, and to always talk about the fact that people are doing research on mice without explaining to the general public. I think we need a lot more communication between the lay public and the scientific world, between industry and the layman, because it is only through these kinds of communications and these kinds of discussions that we would have the funds to advance knowledge. And knowledge does not have an expiration date. It's sitting out there until it's time for us to kind of jump on board, pull that old knowledge and move with it. And I encourage people to go back and read the story on the folks who were interested in mRNA as a therapeutic, using it as a therapeutic, and to see the challenges that they had, lack of funding, that kind of stuff, until some entrepreneurs stepped in and said, this looks promising, we want to go with it. So I'll come back to that a little more as we move forward.
Well, let's bounce to Karen. There's some things that Calvin was just talking about that overlap with some things that you all at Quidel do, but then, oh my gosh, you all are adding so many different things. Maybe just comment a little bit from what Calvin is doing, and we can get into, if the timing is right, the IT and the AI and all the, I think that's a cool thing just on its own.
But I think what was interesting, what I was really resonating, what Calvin was saying, was the speed of how we've been able to use science and technology to just react so quickly. It's personal for me because we actually have a team over in China. We have an office that, frankly, as one of my roles, I built and hired a lot of the people, and as part of an acquisition that we did to service the greater China area. So we started to hear about this virus, fairly early. And I know from a leadership perspective, we were trying to understand and determine if this, is this something that we're going to need to put in place from a diagnostic testing perspective. And then as it started to grow, that became obvious. But what was interesting is when the Chinese scientists released the sequence, we recognized, and had our internal R&D teams recognize, that we had already done work on H1N1. And so there was a lot of things that they could take and then move very, very quickly to get us to the point where we could do a diagnostic test. In fact, I think we started in March, and our first biological test was available and on the market May 8th. And so if you think about that, just what it took, not only to go through all of the R&D, but to work with the FDA, get the EUA in place, but just in that very, very short period of time. It's unlike anything I've ever seen in my career. Then we had all of the other, downstream issues of trying to get all of the supply chain so we could ramp up and produce quickly. But just the speed alone of how that happened is just amazing. And then, we brought on additional products, and then we started to realize that we not only on the molecular side, but also we had the capabilities to build an antigen test. And so we started that in parallel. And what's been fascinating is just the fact of, again, how quickly we've been able to move. And I actually went to one of our general manager in Ohio, and I asked him, I said, tell me something interesting that this team would like to hear about of how you were able to move so quickly. And, it really came down to three things. A, we were lucky. We had some stuff in the vault that we could pull out and we could start to use. B, a lot of dedicated people, from a scientific perspective, from a production perspective, a lot of good relationships with the regulatory bodies that would allow us to move so quickly. But then I think the third one, which is interesting for the entrepreneurship aspect of it, is the fact that from a management and executive leadership perspective, we kind of tried to leave the scientists alone and say, it's okay if things don't work, take a risk, spend some money, do what you need to do, and we'll figure out if we can move it. And so it was really almost like a startup mentality inside our organization to see what could be done. And as a result of that, we've kind of continued that. And as we went then to build the antigen, the same type of approach. Now, obviously, we're building at a bigger scale, and so we have to invest money in manufacturing, invest money in supply chain. We're hiring people like crazy across different parts of the company so that we can just continue to grow and scale. But just the ability to move so fast and has just been amazing for if you really step back and think about it, this will be a great case study, in a couple of years as we just look at the timelines of what's been associated with that.
You're right, Karen. I think some really good points on the timing and the speed. And those of you on the call that have listened to me talk, I always throw personal things in here. So I have to assume you're talking about Jeff Morgan.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jeff was just texting me. And he's the chairman of the BioOhio board, and he wanted to talk like now, and I had to text him back. I'm moderating this group, it's led by Ohio University, and one of your gang, Karen Gibson. So he says, "Oh my, okay. Well, how about 9 o'clock tonight or 9 o'clock in the morning?" So it just like 5 or 10 minutes ago, Jeff was there.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool you talked about China. The other, I'll just sidetrack for just a second. And Bob, well, I've got a cool question for you to weave into what Calvin and Karen were saying. But we adopted a daughter from China. She's 14. She just tried to Zoom bomb me, and I gave her the Heisman. Usually it's okay, but she was born in Wuhan.
Oh, wow.
And so earlier this year, her school harassed her to no end as the coronavirus kid, and oh my. So it was hard for her and hard to deal with those just that racial harassment, which is baseless. So we've spent endless time, and I know Calvin's plays some role in diversity and inclusion and stuff. But, we've spent a lot of time this year talking about what does that mean? And, did these people mean it? And, where are they coming from? So she was tagged as the Wuhan COVID kid. but she fought him back.
Good.
She's a strong one, so she fought him back.
We had
Hey,
a lot
Bob, you heard a
we had
little bit
lot of
about,
personal connection to that as well, because it happened right around Chinese New Year. And so we had a lot of employees who were in China celebrating with their families and then couldn't get back.
Yep.
And so, all the horror stories around the routes that they had to take to get back into the country, and then we had to quarantine. So it was actually a scary time for everybody, but it's amazing how people adapt to the circumstances and have come out of it pretty good.
Yep. Well, Bob, you heard a little bit from Calvin about some of the technology, and Karen talking about the speed. You've worked in so many different sectors over your career, government and industry.
Right.
And, there's a lot of talk right now in the press about, and this is absolutely apolitical, but, Operation Warp Speed in the U.S. government, did that accelerate, to Karen's point, some of the stuff that's happening? Pfizer and Moderna are certainly saying so, but where does government kind of, there's good and bad about it, state and federal, but what do you think about that? And where does that play with the entrepreneurial side of things?
Well, government covers the whole spectrum of things from, providing seed money upfront for new technologies. But, if I could walk through a little bit, and it's something that Calvin said, and about speed being so absolutely important. And speed is very important. When I was at BARDA, we did modeling, and we basically said, if we had a okay vaccine in 2 months, how would that compare to having a really great vaccine in 6 months? And you actually saved more people with your okay vaccine than you did with your great vaccine, because you just never, with the okay vaccine, you killed off those rising curves. And that's, kind of what we're experiencing now, where, cases of COVID are rising in the US. The government's role is really, across the spectrum, from seeding the research and plucking that research from where it is now and applying it. Government is going to try, and they're going to look at where their existing contracts and relationships first. And they're going to say, oh, I already work with the big pharma companies, so I'm going to go to them first. In part because I have existing contracts in place and I don't have to negotiate anything. But they are also going to say, what are the next generations of technology that are going to help me here? And I think the mRNA-based vaccines are a good example of that. There are no mRNA-based vaccines. There were no mRNA-based vaccines at the beginning of this. At the end of this crisis, I guarantee you there's going to be at least one, and people are going to remember that. And so now there's a new standard. Those vaccines are going to be probably swifter to produce. And so they may be our sprinters. And sometimes you need sprinters to respond to a crisis, but you also need marathoners too. And that's how we always described pandemic preparedness, is we're in a marathon here. And we're maybe, this COVID marathon, we're maybe about halfway through. We're at mile 13 or so, and there's still another 13 miles to go. So you got to develop these technologies, but then the various agencies of the government then go, okay, we got to procure it and distribute it. And that's what you're starting to hear now about procurement and distribution, and how the federal government is going to coordinate that. And it's not just the vaccines and the drugs and everything. What about syringes? Do we have enough syringes to do that? And I always think about these things. At some point, at any point, something is rate limiting. Whether is it my vaccine production, or am I limited on syringes? Heaven forbid, 100 doses of vaccine show up and I've got 10 syringes. You know, what do you do in that situation? And so the government has a responsibility not only to, you know, encourage the research, encourage the production, distribute the vaccine, but then get it distributed across the country and help to guide policies on who's going to get vaccine first, who's the, you know, you know, that's another part of the government's role here, is deciding on any tiering system that might be done for who's most important to vaccinate first. Is it our medical professionals? Is it, you know, coal miners or oil workers or energy workers who might keep the lights on and things like that? You know, they're all part of critical infrastructure. What is our critical infrastructure? Are bankers important because, you know, money has to flow and things like that. So, you know, there are many different aspects of the government's role in doing this, all the way to getting vaccines and drugs and medical countermeasures to the people who need them.
Hey, Bob, I want to stick with you for a second because, you know, this is Global Entrepreneurship Week.
Right.
So, you know, and that's, you know, billion-dollar players are also entrepreneurs. They're
Right.
developing new products, but so are, you know, mom and pop nurses and docs, your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
They have ideas, and there's been, I cannot even count how many companies have come to us at BioOhio this year because they have a passion and a caring for trying to help the economy and to try to reverse the supply chain, syringes, swabs, PPE,
Right.
active ingredients of drugs, supply chain of critical components and devices and diagnostics, blah, 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 blah. These companies have no clue what they're doing. They're manufacturing a something, an aerospace part, an auto part, but their leaders have a passion to do something, or just the individual does. So there's a regulatory pathway that they have to learn. There's a reimbursement pathway if you're talking about vaccines or a test. There's all sorts of things that are there, but where can you, from your experience, you know, share with the true entrepreneur where the government can play in this? And how can they help accelerate this passionate entrepreneur that really wants to help? And let's say they have the financing. Let's just say they have it. Where can the government play that? How can they accelerate it?
Well, you know, the government does try and play a role to accelerate the development of new technologies and bring them to bear. Yeah, there's a lot of repurposing, I'll call it, where we've got an existing technology, let's apply that. But I think there's also an important role for new technologies to address these crises and perhaps come up with novel solutions. The government does that probably a lot with dollars. So, you know, and for entrepreneurs, and this was always the thing when I was at BARDA, where we would invest in new technology, was we could walk in with a contract for say $100 million of non-dilutive funding. That's a language that'll mean something to entrepreneurs, because the government's not taking a stake in your company. And we would help you develop your vaccine or technology, but, you know, by supplying that. But the other thing the government does is they have their own in-house experts in regulatory, in manufacturing, in clinical, in, you know, the quality control. And, you know, the approach we took at BARDA was, okay, we are essentially non-paid consultants to you, the company, because we've already made a big investment in you. We want to make sure that you are successful. And so you're having a problem with your manufacturing process. We'll send people to help troubleshoot it with you.
Through the MEP program, There's some NIST and MEP stuff. Ohio has some in all over Ohio that can help with that. Yes. I'm trying to be specific for these entrepreneurs. You know, who are the resources they can go to? And
well, you know, in this particular case, and I'm maybe, you know, I'm a hammer and everything looks like a nail to me. And, you know, I'm colored by my, you know, 9 years at BARDA. But one of the things that BARDA did was they set up something. We used to have something called Techwatch, which was our introduction of technology to us. And they opened it up more globally to other agencies of the government. So Operation Warp Speed, the CDC, NIH, and even the FDA got involved in a repurposed tech watch called Corona Watch. And it was an opportunity for entrepreneurs, for small companies to present their information to the government in quite a wide forum, and where other agencies, not necessarily BARDA, where someone at the NIH would say, I'm really interested in that technology. Come talk to me about how we can help you move that technology forward.
that's a good idea. The Techwatch is a good program for sure. It is also, you know, and for those listening, it is challenging getting into BARDA. I know BARDA really well and many others. You need help. It is, and it's an ongoing process. So there are public policy firms and advocacy consultants that really help you with that. Your federal offices, congressional and Senate, can absolutely help you get in there, especially if you have a cool technology and the timing isn't right. So there are definitely avenues to get in. I want to shift a little bit to Karen. Karen, has Quidel engaged in any federal funding related stuff? Because, you know, you'd think that with some kickstart there, even though you're a publicly traded company, it can help.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of different areas. And one of the key areas is we actually are going to have some funding from NIH to double our manufacturing capacity for our antigen tests. So we've been working with them, I think, for the last 4 or 5 months, and it'll go out through March of next year. But the capability has some been funding, but probably the most valuable has been on the supply chain consulting that they've been able to do, because every week, you know, we are continually trying to develop further suppliers in things like swabs, extraction reagents, even saline, so that we have enough materials to put together into our kits, because our kits come as a complete package. And we had months there where we were able to take things up to like almost the last part of the process, but we didn't have enough swabs. And if you think about it, you know, you've got everybody out there competing for swabs, all of the manufacturers, right. The states are going after them, the federal government's going after them. So, you know, NIH has actually been really helpful with their logistics and supply chain team to divert some things, as well as to help us move more rapidly to qualify new suppliers. And we're starting to see some of the benefits of that now. And
hey, Calvin, let me shift this same subject to you, though, because you've been there at the College of Osteopathic Medicine for a long time. You know, your students, do you sensitize them to some of these business issues? Because they're thinking on the clinician side. They're not maybe thinking on the supply chain and logistics side, but boy, that can impact how they treat a patient. Do you guys, do you help at least sensitize them that, hey, this is an issue, not just currently, but just in life. And that's really important to have that there.
I think I personally am not engaged in that realm, but I think when you are looking at training medical students, one of the things that often has to happen is most of these folks leave school with scientific background, but have no business acumen or even financial acumen. So I think pushing students into doing, their master's programs for business administration, etc., health policy, a number of different areas as kind of add-on to their degrees is kind of opening up a whole new kind of physician, making them aware of the fact that, medicine today is not medicine tomorrow, that new technologies, etc., are going to come along the way. So preparing them to be kind of lifelong learners is actually, I think, the mode that you have to move to, whatever that looks like, so that in the end, they can see opportunities when they arise. Whether it's you discuss mom and pop businesses, or even in this COVID crisis, people who have, MD, PhDs who have got backgrounds in various areas looking at opportunities for starting businesses. I mean, so those are all out there, but I wouldn't say there is a, systematic and consistent effort to do that. But I think with COVID, the COVID dispensation right now, who knows what's going to happen in terms of how education is going to look for students.
I tell you, one of the things that's amazing to me is I probably see 1 to 2 companies a week trying to work with us and pitching us apps on testing and how to use those for contact tracing and how to use those for employer testing. And it's interesting because we see a mix of emergency room physicians who come together, and they come together with some IT, and they've come up with a solution. And so, it's overwhelming, but it's also kind of fun because we are seeing a lot of entrepreneurs coming to us with different types of solutions and trying to figure out how to scale those in a big way. So
True.
And what I would
Very
jump
true.
in, I would literally jump in and say is that I think one of the ways to prepare folks is to let them appreciate the fact that, teams are the way to go. So you might have a great idea as a physician, but you might need that engineer, or you might need that, so I think that's more in line with preparing folks who think they might never be entrepreneurs. But if you really think through the fact that, as you engage with other individuals, different ideas come up, and you can have input into the development of new products, new, getting into business, for example.
Calvin, I can't applaud that comment more. I've probably seen over my 20 years at BioOhio at least 1,000 investor pitches of some entrepreneur that's blah, blah, blah. The greatest one I ever remember was one PowerPoint slide. One person, the technology was in the middle, and in the whole circle around it was all the things he needed to get the product to market. And he says, this is the ecosystem that I need. And it had to do with prototyping, engineering, FDA, reimbursement, manufacturing, distribution, packaging, blah, 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 blah. Mark, it was, and he knew exactly what he knew and what he did not know. Actually, it was a she. It was sweet. You're not supposed to know everything.
Exactly.
It's impossible, or there's only a couple people. So great point there. And you got me thinking too of just the things that are happening during this pandemic, and that crazy movie by Robin Williams, Patch Adams, just talking about life and making people laugh and treating the patient as a person, which is an amazing thing, and even more important with mental health issues this year with the pandemic. Hey, we're down to the last couple minutes. I want to allow each of you to share some final really crisp points during this entrepreneurial week to this group here that they can take away with a nugget or two? Let's start with Bob.
Sure. You know, I think there are a couple things is that for entrepreneurs, if you've got a solution that the government that can help with a public health event such as this, the government wants to hear about that. And the government wants to be aware of that. And they want to be aware early. I think that's one of the things that I always said to people when I was in a position of making decisions at BARDA for the flu division was, don't come to me when you need funding for your next clinical trial. Come to me a year or two before, because I've got to plan my budgets. Now, pandemics aside, money shows up when with events of this year. But pandemics aside, when things go back to normal, don't be afraid to show up early, because people want to hear about your technology. It takes a while to get people in government thinking about your technology and developing that internal advocate within the government. That can be the strongest thing that you can have. If you have one guy in the government selling from the inside, that helps you sell from the outside.
Sorry, I'm muted. Karen.
No, that was funny. I think, a couple of things. Entrepreneurs, you can be an entrepreneur within a company, or you can be an entrepreneur creating your own company. And sometimes you have to find the right company. But I think that's one of the key things to take away, that companies right now are actually looking for people with entrepreneurial spirit, because out of situations like this comes the opportunity for more innovation. And so, don't give up. Don't assume that there's only one path in life. There's generally many, many, and you just have to find the one that's right for you. But, just keep your mind open, continue to innovate, and, find the right place where you can really use those skills.
Well put. Just don't stay in your lab. Get out of your lab. Think a little bit broader, please. Calvin.
I was actually going to be, is it actually a takeoff on the point you just made? Because I think that often scientists, we as, with passion for discovery and just putting knowledge out there, often do not recognize that, we talk about making life better for the rest of the world by providing knowledge. But start thinking, and we have few examples of that right here at Ohio University. I can think of two, the CopCheck lab situation, and even the first test that Joe Jalik and his group put together. So when you think in terms of the basic sciences, I would encourage people to start thinking about, how do you start thinking through applying, and it's probably too late for people like me who've been around for 30 years, but for young scientists, how do you actually transfer knowledge into product? How do you apply, the information you've learned into making life better? So I think that for me would be, since it's Entrepreneurship Week, to appeal to folks who are generating knowledge about how you can convert it, apply it, go from basic science to applied science. We need to straddle that middle.
Wow, that's cool. Well, I think we've wrapped up our time, and really want to thank you, Karen and Calvin and Bob, for sharing some of your thoughts. I hope there were some nuggets there that the participant took away from. One, when I go on these, I just want to take away one. If I got more than one, then that's sweet. That's a really high value time. But I hope everyone is able to take away one kind of cool thing. Please, you can ping us. hold on, let me see if there's any questions. I don't think there's any questions. I don't see any. And, you know, engage with any of us, you in the audience. You know, we're here to be visible, to be open. So if you don't have our contact information, just ping the registration people. And, you know, we have I call them the Wizards of Oz, and that's Michael and Mackenzie in the background here, kind of managing all of this. So I'm going to turn it back over to them. But, you know, in terms of your registration, if you have other questions for us, or a month from now, or a year from now, just ask, because we're all on this cool journey together, and have faith and have passion for what you do.
Thanks to our expert panel and all that have watched and participated in today's discussion. I want to again thank the Center for Entrepreneurship and our co-hosts, Ohio University's Biological Sciences Department, the Corporate Engagement Office, and Tech Growth Ohio for making this event possible. I want to encourage everyone to attend tomorrow's panel focused on entrepreneurship and innovation arising out of a global pandemic.